Greetings, WHAP Warriors. Brad Anderson here. We're going to be talking today about Unit 0. Unit 0 is one of 10 units that are discussed in AP World History. It is called Unit 0 because it is the preview and the lead up to the 9 core units of the course. But all AP World History teachers agree that it is absolutely necessary to understand this time period in order to understand 1200 to the present. There's a lot of human history, and so we try to condense this period as best we can. I used to spend months on this before the reorganization of the content and the curriculum, and so bear with me as I try to condense all of my stories and information as best as possible. Today we're going to be focusing in on civilization, 3500 to 600 BCE. And so that is what we will talk about today. This slideshow will last about 10 minutes. Be sure to watch it carefully because there's questions in the skill builder that are embedded into this lesson. A couple of notes on notes moving forward. And normally I spend time in class, but this is a perfect time to discuss this. Number one, I will be moving fast. Do not attempt to write everything down word for word unless you're able to go back and replay it again. But even then, note-taking is a part of processing the information, not necessarily writing everything down word for word. Summarize, abbreviate, and jot down key points to the best of your ability. Emphasize main ideas. Know thyself and find your own group with note-taking. Nobody should be sitting back with their arms folded and head cocked back, waiting for the knowledge to just go through their forehead. But nobody should be furiously writing every single little detail. You need to find a balance and a middle ground that is suitable to your learning style and your processing. You can always go back to rewrite to learn, or you can retype to learn. And the first time through, though, I don't want your computers out. I don't want you on your screens. You need to hand write this in your journal. Trust me on this. It will help you and your processing of the new content. This is unfamiliar. If you took APUSH last year, a lot of the names, a lot of the terms, a lot of the places you had heard of. My guess is that you had never heard of Quipa, the knotted rope record keeping of the Peruvian Andean ranges. My guess is that you've had limited interaction with the Epic of Gilgamesh, or the city of Uruk, or the Olmec, or Notre Chico. And so that being said, it's very important that your process is one that follows what I'm prescribing here. I will also refer to you to making a homemade study guide when we are at the end of a unit. So at the end of Unit 0, I will give you a review of how to make a homemade study guide, which is essentially a one-page condensed version of all of your notes with key terms, main ideas, drawings, and it is highly organized. Okay, so today's lesson is talking about the first peoples, first farmers, and most of history in a single chapter and a single few slides. Those of you who are in person will be watching a few vignettes, which are short stories in the History Channel series, Mankind's Story of Us All. In that, you'll be taking a look at early farming and early Bronze Age civilizations. Let's talk about those. So here's the big picture. Human history has, up until very recently, has had 3 major global transformations that we're going to talk about within this time period. One, the initial colonization of Earth by human beings, which begins taking place about 200,000 years ago, with people spreading out of the original homeland of human beings, which is Africa, the cradle of civilization, into Australasia, and then eventually into the Americas. That's going to take about 100,000 years. Agricultural societies are going to emerge about 11,000, 10,000 years ago. So most of human existence was hunting and gathering, spreading from one hunting ground to the next, one foraging ground to the next. And it's just been the last 11,000 years or so, since the last ice age, that agricultural societies have emerged. And then finally, the rise of early civilizations. Early civilizations have telltale signs and specific characteristics that separate them from hunter-gatherer societies or small-scale agricultural societies. So let's talk about these early breakthroughs in agriculture. The Neolithic Revolution starts about 11,000, 10,000 years ago BCE. I'm never going to be, stick you on the exact time because many historians associate different times. It basically coincides with the end of the last ice age, with warmer and wetter climates. A broad spectrum diet begins, and a deep knowledge of plants and animals begins with agriculture. Our farming mother, as you will see in the Mankind Story of Us All series, kind of accidentally happens upon learning how to grow and cultivate seed crops. The first very, very important tool of the Neolithic Revolution, and Neolithic means New Stone Age. Paleolithic, which happened before, means Old Stone Age. The New Stone Age sees the hoe, or the digging stick technology. Early farming and early animal husbandry or domestication of animals begins in the Fertile Crescent around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, also known as Mesopotamia. And you see goats, sheep, pigs, cattle, horses, and wheat as early farming characteristics. In sub-Saharan Africa, you see yams, oil palm trees, okra, kola nuts, sorghum, millet, and donkeys. In the Americas, it's llamas, alpacas, teosinte, and early potatoes. China, you see rice, millet, pigs, and dogs. There's consequences, though, with early farming. As people transition from hunting and gathering to farming, you see tooth decay, lower life expectancy, longer work hours, disease because of proximity to animals. And you also see things like patriarchy develop, the dominance of males, famine because of food shortages if a crop fails, and inequality begins to appear. There's also social variations in agriculture from pastoralism. And what pastoralism is not being a sedentary lifestyle, but rather a nomadic lifestyle associated with domesticated animals. Rather than following a reindeer herd or an elk herd or muskox, it would center around domesticated animals that could be easily shepherded to healthy and prosperous grazing areas like sheep, goats, cattle, horses, camels, and I guess reindeer too, once they were domesticated. Why would you bother domesticating these animals and pasturing them and protecting them? Because of their meat, hides, milk, their use in mobility and travel, warfare. They're going to become important, as well as migration, moving from location to location, and wealth. Wealth would become an early indication of an early trademark of agricultural societies and later on civilizations. An example would be the Saka of Azerbaijan, whose women riders and warriors held a high status because they could ride horses and they shepherded animals as well as the male folk. Agricultural village societies are going to develop similar to Catalhuyuk, which is the earliest known dig site where there's complex structures, trades, and crafts. Now, this is where you really need to begin to pay attention. And look at this map. This map is a map of the early first river valley civilizations that begin to develop really when we begin to take a close look at history in 3500 BCE. You see the Olmec here along the Gulf coast, Norte Chico in the city of Caral. You see Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt along the Nile River. You see Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley. You see the Chinese civilization along the Yangtze River in the East China Sea and the Yellow Sea. Here you see the Oxus, where is now modern-day Turkmenistan in Central Asia. And then here you see the what is known as ancient Mesopotamia along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, also known as the Fertile Crescent. You see Babylon and Sumer and Nineveh and Anshan and some of these early places where civilization is going to be cradled. So let's talk about those. Civilizations are going to emerge, and there are specific characteristics of a civilization that you need to know. Agriculture, cities, specialization, technology, record-keeping, and institutions. And essentially, this means that every civilization has a food production where there is surplus. There are cities. People have specialized tasks. The weapon maker, the potter, the shoemaker, the priest, the king, the soldier. They have technology, as far as weapon making and metallurgy, and basketry and pottery and water purification, trying to figure out different ways in order to brew alcohol or types of technologies in this time period. And record keeping, like the writing that we'll talk about here shortly, like cuneiform, which is the first method of known writing, as well as institutions, which include government, religion, and essentially the systems that govern these societies. The first three are located in Mesopotamia, in the Nile River Valley, and in the Peruvian Andes. And that is Sumer, in ancient Mesopotamia, the city-state of Sumer. Egypt, which is more of a territorial state, as well as Norte Chico and the city of Caral in the Peruvian Andes. You also have the Indus Valley Civilization, where there's the cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, where there's standardized weights, written language, and plumbing. The Jia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties in China. And please forgive my proper pronunciations on a lot of these. I do my best. But they are the first to institute the mandate of heaven, which basically says that whoever rules has been given rule by the heavens, by the gods above. And so long as they rule because the heavens want them to. And as soon as you have things like famine, rebellion, sustained long-term warfare, it looks like the heavens want that dynasty to leave and a new dynasty begins, or a period of disarray. We'll talk more about that in the weeks to come. The Oxus civilization in Turkmenistan, which sees artisanry, walls, and irrigation. And the Olmec in southern Mexico that saw mound building. Ball games like the elbow and knee ball games that we'll talk about later on with the Aztec and the Maya, as well as ritual sacrifices and highly organized religion. Now, with civilization, you also see the erosion of equality. Class hierarchies begin with an upper class, commoners, and that is comprised of artisans and peasants, as well as a slave class. You also see law codes develop, like Hammurabi's law code, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, which we will talk about in due time. You see gender hierarchies begin, like patriarchy, where men are rulers, warriors, scholars, and landowners. Military service begins largely to be dominated by men. Religions begin to focus on male deities or male gods, like Yahweh in the Hebrew faith of Judaism, versus old gods and goddesses, which include goddesses like the Mesopotamian Inanna. You also see the first empire cobbled together by Sargon of Akkad. If I ever have a firstborn son, I might name him Sargon. Empires are born, and what Sargon did is he conquered a series of city-states in ancient Mesopotamia and ruled them with his fist, his iron fist. The rise of the state is going to be organized and see institutionalized governance. Early states are led by a king, administered by officials, and defended against external enemies, and so there was a favorable existence if you had some sort of governance. Rulers paid for officials, soldiers, police, and priests, often tied to the divine. You also had writing tied to elite status. Sumer, it was cuneiform, so in ancient Mesopotamia, it was cuneiform. Egypt saw hieroglyphics. In the Andes, you had the knotted rope of Quipa. You had Indus Valley seals, which are still indecipherable. You had China, the early oracle bone scripts, and then the Olmec syllabic signs. Now, comparing the Nile River Valley and ancient Mesopotamia right out of your reading, both were river valley civilizations, but they couldn't have been more different. Egypt and Nubia, the upper and lower Nile River Valley, were predictable. Wheat production was predictable. It was a territorial state with a central governance in the pharaoh. There was building of pyramids, large-scale building of pyramids, and organized religion focused on a benevolent afterlife, meaning a good afterlife. Whereas in ancient Mesopotamia, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers saw unpredictable flooding, and it was a cruel world because there are very few natural barriers. We see this in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is about an ancient Mesopotamian hero who experiences such hardships. There was large-scale deforestation, soil erosion, and soil salinization, and that is why the Mesopotamian region is now dry and arid as you know it to be today. It was organized in city-states, and these city-states you will know well. First led by the Sumerians, dominated by the Sumerians, then by the Akkadians, then the Babylonians, and then the Assyrians, which you will watch a video on next. And so take a look at this video on the rise and fall of the Assyrians, and this is where we will pick up on Monday with a lecture about Astyages, Harpagus, and Cyrus the Great, the first of the Persians. Have a great day.